Hey guys, and welcome back to another video from Tristian's Reef. In this episode, we're going to take a look at the 350 and what's been going on. The last time we saw the 350, I had just finished nuking all of my live rock and had fought season 2 of the Turf Algae Wars. Long story short, I lost. Because no matter what chemical I used, no matter how many days of darkness there was, the turf algae would not go away. It was time for a drastic change and time to address something that had been bothering me for quite a while. So here's my thought process. I have a large tank, lots and lots of fish, and what I thought was lots and lots of export and surface area to handle my nutrients. This was largely true, as I have many times been able to register no nitrates or phosphates in my tank and would have to dose those nutrients in order to get some. Clearly this wasn't my turf algae issue, and neither was my husbandry, as corals grew fine, but inevitably the turf algae would come back. Clearly there was something wrong here, and only a full teardown, cleanup, and replacement of certain things would eradicate this pest for good. So out came the rock, live sand, fish, and corals. The entire tank was stripped down to like new. Overflows were cleaned, and then I just ran bleach through the entire system for a week to literally kill, clean, and sterilize everything in the tank, including all of the equipment. Note to anyone trying this, don't do it inside. After the requisite beating from my wife, the smell of bleach is horrible, and it was literally a war zone in my fish room while the tank was sterilizing for an agonizing 2 weeks. Fortunately, carbon took the smell away, and a ventilation fan kept the smells mostly in check and from keeping and killing my family. So with all of the fish in quarantine, the corals in the shop, and the tank ready to go, all that was left was to choose my new live rock. See, the thing is, while real reef rock worked just fine initially when I set up this tank, I just didn't trust it to not have spores of turf algae inside of it and cause problems for me again. My real reef rock therefore was taken out back, dumped into muriatic acid, and then soaked in bleach for a good measure for quite some time until it was literally just white, dead rock soaking in salt water. So while researching possible sources of rock, I noticed that BRS had started their series of building negative aquascapes, and I followed along, interested and excited to try this type of aquascape in my new tank. There was only one problem. I absolutely detest the look of marker rock as a medium when building aquascapes. You see, my first experience with marker rock was my 150-gallon display tank that was about 8 years ago, and it was considered my first true successful foray into SPS. Like I said, 8 years ago. My SPS covered this rock and grew like weeds into respectable colonies, and overall it was excellent at keeping my parameters in check. The only reason I disliked it was that in over 3 years of growing SPS on that rock, coralline just did not seem to like growing on it. And after 2 years, most of the rock was still bone white, and I was not much of a fan. As shallow and cosmetic as that would seem, I was about to add colonies, large frags, and all kinds of corals to this tank, and I was not looking forward to using marker rock. Negative aquascape be damned. When all else failed, I had almost resorted into trying to build a negative aquascape with my now sterile real reef rock. But after breaking a few pieces, I realized that this rock was nothing like marker rock. Once broken, real reef rock reminded me more of cinder blocks than live rock, and it dawned on me that I could have probably filled my 350 up from top to bottom with this rock, and the marine pure blocks in my sump would have out-filtered it in a heartbeat. So while browsing Facebook for rock and aquascape IDs, I stumbled across ARK Reef. ARK stands for Addictive Reef Keeping. And Tyler was demonstrating a new type of rock that was purple and black like the ones commonly found while diving in Hawaii. Interestingly enough, Tyler was just in the process of producing, perfecting, and offering these new rocks for sale. I jumped at the opportunity to solve the two issues that I had with marker rock. One was the color, and second, unlike the real reef rock's internal structure, ARK Hawaiian rock was real rock and therefore performed better for denitrification. After asking Tyler about 5,000 questions about the colorizing process, harvesting, and stuff like that, I placed my first order. Since I was one of the first people in the country to receive the rock, I clearly had some time to find out more about ARK. Tyler's operation in Marathon, Florida, harvests rock from Florida quarry where it's washed, prepped, and then made available for sale. Pretty simple, right? He offers the ability to slice the rock into thin shelves, much thinner than I have seen available at other places. It makes them a little bit more fragile, but if you know what you're doing, then you're going to be just fine with it. He can also slice them into base pieces and other interesting shapes. As for the paint that is used to color the rocks, it is based off of a food-grade, water-based reef-safe composition. It's similar to the colorizing process used by other manufacturers that you guys might be familiar with, the Carib Seas and the real reef rocks out there. The paint does stain, as it acts like a water-based dye instead of a coating. This means that it seeps into the rock surfaces and anything else that is porous, but it does not clog up the pores in the rock. The colorizing process involves multiple dips and is done by hand to ensure uniform coverage. The result is a dark, brooding purple that is then further enhanced underwater and under typical reef lighting. Tyler kept me informed about my new purchase, and finally, after a few days, these showed up. See, the first thing that struck me was that each piece was individually wrapped before being packed. And although I had ordered the equivalent of my existing real reef rock, these came in considerably more boxes. This meant that they were both lighter, and because I thought I would needed the same amount, I got a lot more than I actually needed. While unpacking the boxes, rocks that should have weighed about 5 pounds or more felt extremely light and almost fragile. So thus began the aquascaping. And for those that follow me on Instagram, you might know that in the near future, I have a custom Elos 350-gallon display that will be coming and replace the 350, which is now destined to be a show tank at our new store. For this reason, my 350 will be used as a colony grow-out tank for TRSC Aquatics, and as a result, we needed lots of flat places for colonies, and lots of mounts for frags and other signature pieces. This isn't your typical aquascape. This is also why the majority of my order was shelf rock, and this was to create as many flat surfaces for 2 to 3 inch discs, which will house mother colonies. My goal was to create as many flat structures as possible, and then hide them behind a negatively aquascaped smaller pieces like the BRS project. Since all of my rock was now going to be this purple color, I was definitely able to try the negative aquascape project. You'll see more about that later on in the video. To bind my structures in place, I used eMarco coralline colored cement, it's listed as pink, to build main structures that serve as the core pieces of my aquascape. In front of each structure, I built shorter, negatively aquascape structures that will fill in the spaces and break up the uniformity that shelf rock typically creates. Looks just like a stacked bunch of rocks. So working with the marker rock was extremely easy. Using the Instaset plus thick glue and then filling in the spaces with reef cement worked like a dream. Although the eMarco cement did not exactly match the color of the rock, it still blended in well in most areas. On my second shipment of rock, Tyler was kind enough to send me some of the paint mixed in the final stage for me to have a crack at painting some of the rock and doing a bunch of touch-up. It was a lot of fun. The paint was watery and super easy to apply, so definitely make a space where you won't mind getting things messy or on the floor. Me, I chose a regular box and I made a little square that you can actually put all the rock structures in, and it's free to get paint anywhere you want to. Don't let this stuff drop on your driveway or in your garage or something like that. If it touches cement, it's over. You're not getting it out. I didn't have to worry too much about paint uniformity because the rocks were already in their final stage. What I did have to do was put 2 or 3 coats on the areas where I had filled in with eMarco cement, and I waited about 2 hours in between each coat to make sure that the eMarco had blended into the aquascape and that it would absorb the paint. Unfortunately, I didn't have the paint when I added the first batch of rocks to the tank to start cycling, but it's not noticeable enough for me to pull and paint those joints. The end result is a stepped aquascape that avoids the stacked and fruit stand look. I'll admit that this was the longest I ever took on an aquascape. It was over 2 weeks, and when adding the rock to the tank, it started gassing off as it absorbed water and released air bubbles. I was extremely happy. This meant that the rock was really porous and that it would do a great job at helping me to filter my tank. I had interestingly never seen this phenomenon with real reef rock or any artificial rock except Aqua Roche. Overall, I'm extremely excited for this tank. The cycle is over, I have sponges growing in my sump, and I have a small cleanup crew in there just keeping things clean. I've also added 1 fish that's gone through quarantine. Currently I have about 40 to 50 fish that have just finished quarantine and are going to be observed for another 2 weeks before being added to the tank, but I'll save that update for the next video. I want to thank Tyler for answering all of my questions and all of you loyal viewers for watching. If you like what I do and enjoy my videos, please hit that like and subscribe button. I don't do Patreon and there's no fees for watching my content, but if you like it and subscribe, that lets me know that I should keep making videos and that you guys enjoy them. So with that said, until next time, I'll catch you guys on the flip side.